In today's fast-paced world, we often believe we are in full control of our choices, actions, and beliefs. Yet, as Carl Jung highlighted in his groundbreaking work, much of what drives human behavior lies beneath the surface of conscious awareness. Manipulation does not always arrive as an obvious or direct force. More often, it hides in the subtle and invisible influences of everyday life. Social expectations, cultural norms, media narratives, and even the unspoken dynamics within personal relationships can all serve as channels through which manipulation operates. Jung believed that the human psyche is divided between what is conscious and what remains unconscious. The unconscious mind stores everything we repress, deny, or fail to recognize about ourselves, shaping how we view the world and how the world, in turn, affects us. This gap between what we know and what we ignore within ourselves creates fertile ground for manipulation to take root without us noticing. When we operate mostly on autopilot, guided by unconscious beliefs, fears, and emotions, we become highly suggestible to external forces. One of Jung's key contributions to psychology is the concept of the shadow, the hidden part of ourselves made up of traits and impulses we refuse to acknowledge. While the shadow is a natural and inevitable part of human nature, it also represents our blind spots. When others detect aspects of our shadow, such as insecurity, guilt, fear of rejection, or a deep-seated desire to belong, they can exploit these vulnerabilities to subtly guide our decisions and behaviors to their advantage. What makes this type of manipulation so insidious is precisely its subtlety. It does not always come through explicit commands or visible pressure. More commonly, it emerges through emotional undercurrents, unspoken expectations, or social conditioning that makes us conform without ever questioning why. Have you ever found yourself agreeing to something that doesn't align with your true values just to avoid conflict or discomfort? Or perhaps you have felt an unexplainable obligation to please someone, even when it feels draining. These are subtle signs that manipulation might be at play. Jung also warned of the collective unconscious, a shared reservoir of symbols, beliefs, and instincts inherited from humanity's collective history. This collective layer of the psyche can act as a powerful tool for societal manipulation. Cultural archetypes, like the obedient citizen, the self-sacrificing caregiver, or the tireless worker, can be unconsciously activated to make individuals conform to roles they did not consciously choose. Recognizing that we are all susceptible to manipulation is the first step toward liberation. By understanding the unconscious mechanisms that shape our perceptions and reactions, we can begin to reclaim agency over our lives. Jung's work invites us to look inward and question the invisible forces that might be steering us. Before we can fully identify external manipulation, we must first shine a light on the parts of ourselves that remain hidden. The deeper we drift away from ourselves, the easier it becomes for manipulation to take hold. Carl Jung emphasized that disconnection from our true identity opens the door for external forces to dictate how we live, think, and feel. When we lose touch with our authentic self, the unique individual beneath the roles we play, the masks we wear, and the expectations we try to meet, we become vulnerable to the subtle hands that steer us. Jung's concept of individuation is central to this discussion. Individuation is the lifelong psychological process through which a person integrates the conscious and unconscious parts of the mind, coming closer to their true self. It is the path to wholeness and autonomy. However, when this process is neglected or obstructed, we fall prey to the collective norms and projections that come from society, family, partners, or authority figures. We start shaping our identity around what is expected of us, not around who we truly are. One of the most common ways manipulation manifests is through emotional disconnection, when you no longer trust your inner voice. This happens gradually. Over time, subtle conditioning teaches you to second-guess your intuition and to seek validation outside of yourself. You start relying on others' approval to feel worthy or to make decisions. Manipulators thrive in this environment as they can more easily implant ideas, beliefs, and behaviors in those who are disconnected from their inner guidance. Jung observed that when we do not recognize and accept all parts of our psyche, including the uncomfortable and darker aspects, we become fragmented. This fragmentation leads to inner conflicts and a persistent sense of dissatisfaction, making us easy targets for external influences that promise to fix or complete us. Advertisements, social pressure, and even personal relationships often take advantage of this internal gap. They create a narrative that you are not enough as you are and that you must conform or earn your value. This disconnection also fosters dependency. When you forget who you are at your core, you may unknowingly allow others to define your worth or determine your path. You might stay in unhealthy situations, professionally, socially, or romantically, simply because you have been conditioned to believe you need them to feel whole. Jung's work reminds us that true freedom and resilience arise from within, from embracing our authentic self, with all its light and shadow. At the root of this disconnection is fear, fear of rejection, of abandonment, of being misunderstood or unloved. Manipulators often sense and exploit these fears. Whether consciously or unconsciously, they tap into the emotions you have not fully confronted within yourself. The less you are in touch with your true self, the more likely you are to accept a version of reality shaped by others. Reconnecting with who you truly are requires courage and conscious effort. Jung challenges us to take responsibility for our inner world, to face the uncomfortable truths, and to step into our individuality. Only then can we break free from manipulative patterns and start living a life that is genuinely ours. Manipulation rarely arrives with a clear label. Often, it operates silently, working beneath your awareness and influencing how you think, feel, and act. Carl Jung believed that the unconscious constantly communicates with us through subtle signals, emotions, dreams, physical sensations, and recurring patterns in our behavior. By tuning into these signs, we can begin to recognize when manipulation is taking place. Based on Jung's insights into the human psyche, here are 5 powerful clues that you might be under the influence of manipulation without realizing it. 1. You constantly feel guilty or emotionally indebted to someone. Manipulators often exploit feelings of guilt to control others. If you notice that you frequently feel responsible for someone else's happiness or that you owe someone emotionally, it may be a sign of hidden manipulation. Jung taught that unresolved guilt from the unconscious can easily be activated by others who understand your inner vulnerabilities. Feeling obligated to meet someone's needs at the expense of your own well-being is one of the clearest red flags. 2. Fear, not desire, is guiding your choices. Another key signal is when you notice that your decisions are driven more by fear. Fear of disappointing others, fear of being excluded, fear of punishment, rather than genuine desire or passion. Jung emphasized that fear rooted in the unconscious often dictates behavior when we have not faced certain inner conflicts or traumas. Manipulators intuitively sense this and create environments where fear becomes the main motivator, keeping you in a reactive, compliant state. 3. You find yourself repeating self-sabotaging patterns. Jung believed that what we do not make conscious will return as fate. If you find yourself stuck in cycles of self-sabotage, whether in relationships, work, or personal goals, it could be a sign that unconscious manipulation is playing a role. Manipulative people often subtly reinforce your insecurities or doubts, causing you to second-guess your abilities and stay small. These patterns might feel familiar, even comfortable, but they stem from unconscious programming that benefits someone else more than you. 4. You seek constant validation before making decisions. When you become overly reliant on others' opinions before making choices, it may point to deeper manipulation. Jung highlighted how disconnection from the inner self makes us dependent on external sources for guidance. Manipulators encourage this dependence, making you feel incapable of trusting your own judgment. If you regularly feel paralyzed without someone else's approval, you may be caught in a dynamic where your autonomy is being undermined. 5. You feel drained or uneasy after certain interactions. Your emotional and physical responses are powerful indicators. Jung believed that the body often reacts before the conscious mind catches on. If you frequently leave interactions feeling exhausted, anxious, or subtly off, your unconscious is likely picking up on manipulation or toxic dynamics. Manipulators drain energy by subtly violating boundaries and fostering confusion or self-doubt. Recognizing these signs is the first step in reclaiming your power. Jung's teachings encourage us to listen to these unconscious signals as a way of protecting and honoring our authentic selves. The more aware you become of these subtle clues, the more difficult it becomes for others to control or influence you without your consent. At the heart of Jung's work lies the understanding that every human being carries within them a shadow, the unconscious part of the psyche that contains traits, emotions, and desires we often reject or suppress. While the shadow is a natural aspect of who we are, it becomes dangerous when left unexamined. Manipulators, whether knowingly or instinctively, exploit the hidden contents of your shadow to influence and control you. Jung believed that the less aware we are of our own shadow, the more likely we are to project it outward, making it easier for others to take advantage of our blind spots. For example, if you repress feelings of anger, you may unconsciously submit to those who express dominance or aggression. If you deny your need for validation, you might become susceptible to people who withhold approval as a means of control. Manipulators are often skilled at identifying what you haven't fully accepted within yourself. They sense your unresolved insecurities, your unhealed wounds, and the emotions you avoid. Once they detect these vulnerabilities, they subtly use them as leverage. For instance, if you carry an unconscious fear of abandonment, a manipulator might create scenarios where you constantly feel at risk of losing their affection or acceptance, keeping you emotionally dependent and compliant. Jung also spoke about the persona, the mask we wear to navigate society. While the persona helps us fit into the world, it can also disconnect us from our authentic self. Manipulators often encourage you to over-identify with your persona, the good girl, the loyal employee, the selfless partners, until you become trapped in a role. In doing so, they reinforce the idea that your worth is conditional on fulfilling these external expectations. Beyond personal relationships, institutions and systems can manipulate on a collective scale by exploiting both individual and collective shadows. Jung referred to this as the power of the collective unconscious, where shared archetypes and unresolved cultural fears are manipulated to influence entire groups. For example, media and propaganda may activate archetypes like the hero or the victim to provoke fear or conformity within the masses, often without people realizing they are being emotionally swayed. The manipulator then becomes a mirror for your unconscious. They reflect the parts of yourself you are unwilling to see, making it easier for them to guide your actions. Jung warned that until you make the unconscious conscious, you will continue to be controlled by forces that operate outside your awareness. This dynamic is not always malicious. Sometimes those who manipulate are themselves unaware of their actions, driven by their own unresolved shadows. However, the effect on you remains the same: a loss of personal power, emotional autonomy, and freedom of choice. To break free from this influence, Jung's solution is clear: turn inward. By courageously exploring your shadow and integrating its contents into your conscious self, you reduce the manipulator's ability to use these hidden aspects against you. Self-knowledge becomes your shield, allowing you to reclaim your inner authority and resist the subtle forces that seek to control your narrative. The journey to freedom from manipulation begins with awareness. Carl Jung believed that the path to individuation, becoming your true whole self, is the key to breaking free from unconscious influences. Once you recognize how manipulation exploits your shadow and emotional blind spots, the next step is to consciously reclaim your power and rebuild a stronger connection with your authentic self. The first act of resistance is self-observation. Jung emphasized the importance of paying close attention to your thoughts, emotions, and reactions. Start noticing when you feel guilt, fear, or obligation in certain interactions. Ask yourself, is this truly my choice, or am I acting out of conditioning? This level of introspection helps you catch moments when external forces are steering you away from your personal truth. The more you observe without judgment, the clearer these patterns become. Another vital step is shadow work, the process of exploring and integrating the parts of yourself you have repressed or denied. This can be uncomfortable, as it involves facing insecurities, unprocessed emotions, and the aspects of your personality that society or family may have taught you to reject. However, by bringing these elements into conscious awareness, you reduce their power to control you from the background. Jung famously said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." This inner work is how you take back your autonomy. Establishing healthy boundaries is another essential strategy. Manipulators often thrive on blurred boundaries, subtly crossing emotional or psychological lines to keep you off balance. Learn to identify your limits and practice communicating them firmly but respectfully. Boundaries are not walls. They are tools for protecting your energy and values while preserving meaningful relationships on your terms. Additionally, cultivating inner validation helps free you from the need for constant external approval. Jung taught that individuation leads to a stronger sense of self, where your self-worth is no longer dependent on fulfilling roles or meeting expectations imposed by others. Begin to trust your instincts and prioritize your inner voice, even when it challenges societal norms or the expectations of those around you. Finally, connect with what Jung called the self, the archetype of wholeness within you. This means aligning your life with your deeper values, passions, and purpose. When you act from a place of inner authenticity, manipulation loses its grip. You become less susceptible to subtle control because your choices are grounded in self-awareness, not in fear or insecurity. Regaining control over your life is a continuous process. Jung's work reminds us that freedom is not simply about rejecting external manipulation. It is about integrating all parts of yourself so that you are no longer fragmented or easily swayed. With each conscious step, you reinforce your inner sovereignty and move closer to living a life that is truly your own, free, empowered, and authentic.